The sound echoes through the African dawn, desperate, rhythmic thumping against weathered wood. Dr. James Kariuki wakes to an impossible sound. Something is knocking at his gate. Not scratching, not bumping, knocking. When he opens the door, his breath catches. Standing there, covered in dust, trembling with exhaustion, is a baby elephant, 3 months old. His eyes, those impossibly expressive eyes, lock onto the veterinarian's face with a look of recognition, of desperate hope. "Where's your mama?" James whispers, already knowing the answer will break his heart. The calf takes one step forward and collapses against the man's legs. This is the true story of Ndovu, which means elephant in Swahilian, a journey that defies everything we thought we knew about animal memory, love, and the will to survive. To understand how this moment came to be, we need to go back to a time when Ndovu wasn't alone, when the world was safe, and his mother's presence was as constant as the African sun. 3 weeks earlier, Dr. James Kariuki had been conducting his monthly wildlife health assessments in the Tsavo Conservation Area. James wasn't your typical veterinarian. For 15 years, he'd dedicated his life to treating wildlife across Kenya. His small house, surrounded by that distinctive wooden fence, sat on the edge of the conservation area, deliberate choice that made him accessible to rangers and researchers who needed emergency veterinary care for animals in crisis. On that particular morning, James had encountered a small herd of elephants near a watering hole. Standard protocol: observe from a distance, document their health, move on. But something made him stay longer that day. One of the females, a matriarch with gentle eyes and a distinctive notch in her left ear, was nursing a calf. The baby couldn't have been more than 2 months old, small even for his age, with oversized ears that seemed to catch every sound in the savannah. What happened next, James would replay in his mind 1,000 times. The baby elephant, curious and fearless in that way only the truly innocent can be, had wandered toward James's vehicle. The mother immediately moved between them, but she didn't charge. She didn't trumpet a warning. Instead, she simply stood there, watching James with an intelligence that made him uncomfortable, as if she were measuring him, judging his character. The mother elephant had listened, actually listened, her massive ears swiveling toward him. And this was the part that seemed impossible now, she'd allowed her calf to approach. Not close, but closer than any wild elephant calf should ever approach a human vehicle. For 10 minutes, the three of them had existed in that strange space, human, mother, child, before the matriarch finally shepherded her baby back to the herd. James remembered thinking, "That's the most trusting wild elephant I've ever encountered." He had no way of knowing that baby elephant was memorizing everything. The sound of his voice, the shape of his vehicle, the location of his home, which the herd had passed twice in the weeks that followed. Elephants never forget. But this was beyond memory. This was faith. It happened on Tuesday. 2 men on a motorcycle, carrying huge bags, were spotted in the area. Rangers were tracking them, but the Tsavo Conservation Area is vast, and 2 men could vanish like smoke across 8,000 square miles. The herd was feeding in a clearing bordered by acacia trees. 17 elephants, the matriarch with the notched ear, her calf Ndovu, 3 other mothers with their babies, and the rest sisters, aunts, adolescents, a family. the silence was broken in an instant. When danger threatens, elephant herds run. The matriarch trumpets the alarm, and they run fast, coordinated, together. But here's what most people don't understand about elephants. Mothers with very young calves face an impossible choice. A 3-month-old elephant can run, but not fast enough. Not for long enough. In the sudden confusion, the herd scattered. But one female stayed behind. She did not run. She positioned herself between her baby and the approaching danger. Her massive body became a shield. When the sister returned, she tried to lead them away, but the mother had already made her choice. She would not leave her calf. Little Ndovu saw everything from beneath his mother's body. He watched as unfamiliar men moved closer. He felt his mother surge forward, calling out loudly, trying to drive them away and protect her calf. Ndovu watched as she stood her ground with all her strength. She refused to run. She refused to leave him behind. She holding her position to the very end. Then she fell, and the world grew quiet. Ndovu had seen everything. 7 minutes that Ndovu spent hidden in the tall grass 20 feet away, absolutely silent. Some instinct, perhaps his mother's final telepathic push, kept him motionless, invisible. When the men finally left on their motorcycle, the clearing was silent except for one sound. A baby elephant's cry for his mother. A sound that elephant researchers describe as the most heartbreaking in nature. Ndovu was alone as darkness fell. Predators would come. A baby elephant alone is vulnerable to lions, hyenas, even leopards. Somehow, through grief and shock, survival instinct kicked in, and Ndovu remembered, the human with the soft voice, the one his mother had trusted. The one whose home he'd seen, whose location he'd memorized. He began to walk. 48 hours. That's how long Ndovu walked through the African wilderness. 48 hours for a baby who should never have been alone, who should have been within touching distance of his mother every moment of his life. The Tsavo landscape is unforgiving. Open savanna, dense bush, rocky outcrops. For a 3-month-old elephant, every mile is an odyssey. He could cover maybe 10 miles in a day under normal circumstances, but these weren't normal circumstances. He was dehydrated. He hadn't nursed in 2 days. His feet, still tender, were cut and bleeding, but he walked. Scientists who later heard this story struggled to explain it. Yes, elephants have extraordinary spatial memory. Yes, they can remember locations and navigate over vast distances. But this wasn't about memory alone. This was about intent. About understanding that somewhere in this vast, terrifying world, there was one human who might help. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an elephant behaviorist from the University of Nairobi who later studied Ndovu's case, put it this way. We're talking about a baby elephant who walked approximately 20 to 25 miles through unfamiliar territory, somehow avoiding predators, somehow finding water, somehow navigating to a specific location he'd seen twice in his life. This isn't just memory. This is problem solving. This is hope. This is something we don't have a scientific term for yet. Imagine being 3 months old. Imagine being alone in a wilderness filled with things that want to kill you, and somehow finding the strength to walk for 2 days straight because you remember one kind voice. That's who Ndovu was. That's who he had to become. When James heard the knocking at dawn, his first thought was that it was one of the local rangers with an emergency case. He pulled on his clothes and hurried to the gate. Nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. The baby elephant was barely standing. His eyes, those thoughtful, intelligent eyes, were clouded with exhaustion and trauma. His body was covered in scratches and dust. But when he saw James's face, something changed. His ears perked forward. He took that one step. "Where's your mama?" James asked, the words escaping before he could stop them. His hands were already moving, checking for injuries, assessing the situation. The calf's breathing was rapid and shallow. Dehydration, exhaustion, shock, but also recognition. The baby elephant knew this human, had come to this human. James ran inside and returned with water and emergency glucose solution. Getting a traumatized wild elephant to drink should have been impossible, but Ndovu was beyond such concerns now. He drank desperately, his small trunk clumsy and shaking. As the sun rose higher, James made the calls. First to the ranger station. "Have there been any bad elephant incidents in the sanctuary in the last few days?" The answer came within an hour. "Yes." A female with a mark on her left ear. And then silence on the phone. The ranger continued, "And her cub is missing. We found no trace." "He's here," James said quietly, looking at Ndovu, who had finally stopped shaking. "He's here. He came to me himself." The ranger on the other end was silent for a long moment. "That's impossible. He's standing in my yard." The second call was to the David Sheldrick Wildlife Trust Elephant Orphanage in Savo. If there was anywhere that could give this baby a chance, it was there. The Sheldrick Trust has been rescuing orphaned elephants since 1977. Their facility in Savo is a haven for babies who have lost everything. But even for them, Ndovu's case was extraordinary. "We've had calves brought in by rangers, found by tourists, reported by villagers," said Rob Carhartley, one of the organization's veteran keepers. "But we've never had a calf make a 2-day journey on his own to seek help from a specific human. That's unprecedented." When Ndovu arrived at the sanctuary, he was in rough shape. Besides the dehydration and exhaustion, he was emotionally shattered. Trying that the first 48 hours would be critical. Enter Sarah Chen, a 28-year-old elephant researcher who had been studying at the sanctuary for 6 months. Sarah had completed her PhD in animal cognition at Cornell University and had come to Kenya specifically to study elephant grief, trauma, and recovery. She had a gentle manner, a gift for reading animal behavior, and an unshakable patience. When Ndovu arrived, something in her approach resonated with him. Perhaps it was her quiet voice, reminiscent of James. Perhaps it was simply the right person at the right time. She sat with Ndovu for 16 hours straight that first night, speaking softly, offering comfort, never pushing, just being present. "He would look at me with these eyes that held so much pain," Sarah later wrote in her research journal, "and I would think, 'You're 3 months old. You should be playing. You should be carefree. Instead, you've seen things no creature should ever witness.'" But slowly, impossibly, Ndovu began to respond. He took his first specialized formula. Milk orphaned elephants need a specific blend that mimics their mother's milk. He touched Sarah's hand with his trunk, that universal elephant gesture of connection. And when the other orphans at the sanctuary came to investigate this new arrival, he didn't pull away. There were 12 other elephants at the facility, all orphans, all with their own tragic stories. There was Amani, a female calf rescued from a drought. There was Tembo, who'd fallen into a well and been abandoned by his herd. There was Zuri, barely 4 months old, whose mother had died from disease. They became Ndovu's new family. Recovery isn't linear. That's true for humans, and it's true for elephants. There were dark days. Times when Ndovu would stand motionless for hours, staring toward the open savanna, as if waiting for his mother to appear on the horizon. Times when he refused to eat. Times when he would wake in the night, trumpeting in distress, and only Sarah's presence could calm him. But there were also moments of light. 3 weeks after his arrival, Ndovu played for the first time. Actually played chasing Zuri around a mud wallow, flapping his ears, that unmistakable expression of joy crossing his face. Sarah cried watching it. "That's when I knew he was going to make it," she said. "Not just survive, but actually live again." The sanctuary became his world. Every morning, the orphans would be walked into the bush by their keepers, mimicking natural elephant behavior. They'd learn which plants to eat, how to dust bathe, how to navigate the terrain. The older elephants taught the younger ones, just as they would in a wild herd. Ndovu thrived under this routine. His weight increased, his energy returned, and something else emerged: his personality. He was cautious, but curious, thoughtful. The keepers noticed he would observe situations carefully before acting unusual for a baby elephant, who are typically impulsive and reckless. Perhaps his trauma had made him older than his months. Perhaps he'd always been this way. Dr. James Kariuki visited Ndovu twice in those first months. The first visit was 1 week after Ndovu's arrival. James walked into the sanctuary compound, and Ndovu had been feeding with the other calves immediately stopped. His ears went forward. He stared in, then he ran. Elephants that small don't run gracefully. It's more of a chaotic, wobbling gallop. But Ndovu ran straight to James and pressed his head against the man's chest. They walked together through the sanctuary grounds for an hour, Ndovu never letting go.